Welcome back to another Ask GMBN Tech. This is our weekly Q&A clinic show where we hopefully get to answer some of your mountain bike tech related questions. Don't forget you can get yours into the email address that's on the screen there right now. And of course you can use the hashtag Ask GMBN Tech in the comments below. And hopefully we'll answer some of your questions next week. So kicking off this week's show, the first one is from WINTERFELL 7102. Got a few questions here. So number one is, can I mix different tubular sealants like Stan's and E13? To be honest, I'd say no. I'm sure there probably are options out there that you can, but generally you don't want to do this. You can separate them when you do this. You can also set them off. What I mean by set them off is actually start the curing process where the rubber actually sets. So I have heard of people putting other fluid in with Stan's and it actually cures that rubber and they end up with those big sort of blobs of rubber floating around on the inside of the tyre, which of course means it's not going to work very well. So if you're just talking about topping up your sealant and you've already got some in there, maybe you should just ditch what's already in there and start fresh, or you could scoop that out and save it again for when you have some of the same brand. Might be the best approach to take in that case. One other thing to add is when you are replacing sealant, of course there's two ways of doing that. There is the way you can actually replace the sealant through the valve stem, of course, in which case you're not going to be sure what sort of condition it's in on the inside. If you're just doing this routinely, it's not too bad. But if you're doing this after a long period of time, you don't know what sort of state it is on the inside. The best way is to actually undo the tyre completely, inspect it on the inside, see if it's dried up, see what sort of state it's in, and then add to that. Has anyone else out there actually tried mix and matching different sealants? What sort of experiences have you had with them? Let us know in the comments if you have. I'm just curious to know that. Next question from the same guy is it normal for a fork to have a slight gap between the crown and lower headset bearing? We can actually see the bearing seals. I wouldn't say it's that common. It's kind of hard. You say you've got 2017 Lyric, you haven't said what bike or what headset it's in. You've got to bear in mind that the headset orientation is very different on a lot of bikes, and ultimately all the seal has to do is stop water getting in. If there's a gap between the seal and the bottom of the headset where you can actually get moisture in, then that's not installed correctly. The seal needs to be flush against it. It is possible that you can see that seal though. Maybe you can take a photo of that and then fire that into the hellotech@gmbn.com email address, and if you put headset query for my attention on there, hopefully I can check that out for you and let you know. Next one, would you recommend putting a downhill fork on a Rocky Mountain Slayer, so that's an enduro bike, and a 26-inch wheel out the back to make it a kind of park beast? Sorry to ask so many questions. I'm going on a bike vacation soon and want to know what I need to buy. Okay, so first up, if you put a 26-inch wheel on the back of that bike, all that's really going to do is lower your bottom bracket, and all you end up doing is striking your pedals and or your cranks, and even potentially your chain guide on rocks and obstacles in the park. So I probably wouldn't recommend doing that. And also the fact that 27.5-inch wheels do roll over stuff a bit better, so it's not really going to be that much fun going backwards towards a 26-inch wheel. As for putting a downhill fork on the front, really that frame is not designed for that. It might be a long travel enduro frame, but the strain that a twin crown fork puts on a head tube of a bike is a lot more than a regular single crown fork. And you find that some manufacturers, they just will not warranty the frame. I know, for example, that YT bikes with the Capra, they do say that it's twin crown compatible, so it would suggest you can make a sort of a park bike with a longer travel fork than you can with the conventional bikes. But I definitely wouldn't do that in your case unless you find out that on your warranty that it is okay. You've also got to consider that putting a 200mm travel fork on a bike that's 160, 170mm, that's 30mm extra. It's quite a lot of extra travel, even if you're going to have that extra sag you get with the travel. It's not going to feel that good, I wouldn't have thought. So I'd probably say no, don't do that. So next up is from the SEOB. Great show, guys. Really love the retro stuff. After 20 years, I finally bought myself a new bike, a Canyon Neuron AL 8.0. Nice bike, that. Going from rim brakes to disc brakes, I have heard that you need to bed in the brakes to get the maximum braking power. What's the best way of doing this? Okay, so also for the benefit of anyone else that's not sure about this, the idea of bedding your brakes in properly is to deposit some of the material from the brake pads onto the braking rotor surface. Now, the reason why this is so important is that if you don't deposit enough, you're going to end up with patches of that sort of brake residue, brake dust residue on the rotor. And as you're braking, you're going to get very slight oscillations of the brake pad, and it vibrates and it will squeal in time. And not to mention the fact that it just won't be bedded in properly. So the best way to do this is get up to sort of a medium speed, let's say 20, 25 miles an hour, and just brake firmly and surely until the bike comes to a halt. What you don't want to do is go flying down a really long hill and just drag the brake really slightly. You do this, you're in risk of sort of polishing the disc up a bit and glazing that pad surface over. I just want to throw you to a video as well. The link is in the description below on how to bed in your brakes effectively and make sure you've got them set up correctly in the first place. Hopefully that's going to be useful for you.
What I find is the most effective way is just to douse some water right through that caliper onto the brake pads, and do the same thing, just roll down, grab on, and do that a few times, so 2 or 3 times, douse them with water, and that really works. Just make sure you're using pure water. I wouldn't do it if you've got energy drink or anything like that.
Next up from Grant Doolittle. Is it okay to put a 130 or 140mm fork on a 120mm travel frame? I know it's going to change the geometry a bit, and that's to be expected. But is it true that it puts pressure on the head tube and could cause a crack, or is that a thing of the past? Okay, well, for starters, it is a problem with longer travel forks, and we're talking if the bike was designed for a 100mm travel fork, you put a 150 on there. That is going to be a significant strain on that head tube, as well as messing up your geometry, because it's going to bump the bottom bracket up really high off the ground, slacken your seat angle off, and also slacken the head tube angle. So just going for an extra 10mm travel, to be honest, I barely think it will make any difference, and 20mm as well. I think you'll be fine with that. 30mm and over, I would say, is probably that cut-off point where you can actually mess up the handling of the bike a bit as well. So 10 to 20mm, that's not too bad, and you can probably recover some of that in the sag of the fork just by having that much more travel as well. Now, the things that it is going to change on the bike, so your head angle will become a little bit more relaxed. I certainly don't see that as a bad thing. The seat angle will become a little bit more relaxed as well. Now, this can be a bad thing if you have got quite a slack seat angle on your bike, and the reason for that is when climbing, seated of course, it just means that your seated position is going to be further towards the rear axle of the bike and more likely for the bike to want to wheelie basically. So you can counter that slightly by moving the saddle forwards on the rails. It's not ideal, but it's a good workaround for that. And the other thing, of course, is your bottom bracket height will come up very slightly. Now, of course, the amount you'll notice on that bike, maybe 10mm if you went up 20mm just with the sag sort of compensation. You're barely going to notice that unless you're really experienced with that sort of thing. You've tried lots of different height bottom brackets. Now, obviously, the higher a bottom bracket is on a bike, the more unstable the bike feels. The lower it is, the more stable you feel because you're in the bike as such. So again, 10, 20mm, okay, but any more than that, you don't want to mess with it. Ultimately, it's the axle to crown measurement that is the most important thing, not just adding on a 10 or 20mm of extra travel. Now, you find on some forks, a fork that's got 130mm might be longer than another fork of 130mm. And the measurement you're looking for is from the center of the axle, so this is the axle that runs through the hub, to the crown. And what I mean by that is where the crown race sits on for the headset of the bike. That is your axle to crown measurement. Now, you want that to be as close as possible to the original spec fork on your bike. Now, if you're raising your axle to crown by 20mm on that bike, that's going to equate to something similar to about 1 degree. So you're going to lose a degree, or give or take, about that off your head angle. Again, like I said, not necessarily a bad thing, but you will raise the BB and slacken the seat angle at the same time. Now, whilst I've said that I think this is okay to do, your manufacturer may not say the same thing. So if you're doing this, you've got to make sure that this is your decision and it doesn't invalidate your warranty. And obviously you've got to be happy that you want to do this. So just check that. And if you're unsure, check with your local bike shop. Next up from ID666. Doddy, can you please talk about some basic first aid that a rider should carry? Hey Joe, well, that's a really good idea. Now, I'm not sure we've actually done this properly in detail. I've discussed this with Neil because I think we should do this on the channel, but there are a bunch of things that even a person that doesn't know that much about first aid should carry when you go riding. And there are a number of ways you can do this. You can go to your local sort of store, like a Boots or something like that, and you can get all of those first aid supplies. Or if you look on screen right now, there's an Evoc first aid kit, and it comes in a waterproof pouch. Now, even if you build this sort of kit yourself, I definitely recommend using some sort of waterproof pouch, because you want to make sure that all that stuff is clean and in good condition, i.e. not covered in mud and muck that's likely to be inside your riding bag. And of course, make sure whenever you're buying this sort of stuff that you take note of the sort of the sell by date on it, because a lot of the stuff does have a sell-by date, and it's going to be no good for using on cuts and abrasions after that date. First up, I would recommend carrying some rubber gloves with you. So the reason for that is even if you ride with cycling gloves on, you're still going to have dirty hands and be in a dirty environment. So if you're tending to a cut on yourself or a friend's leg, for example, you do not want to get any sort of dirt or grime into that cut, or you're going to get infected basically. So you take your gloves off, put those rubber gloves on before you inspect it. It means you don't have to wash your hands. Next up, I'd recommend having some antiseptic wipes. They're good, but again, they're one of those perishable items that do have a sell-by date on them. So you don't need to buy them in bulk. Just buy a few, keep them in your riding pack, keep an eye on the date on those things. And they're really, really good for cleaning in and around a wound so it doesn't get too infected. Next up, something I like to carry is a plaster spray. Now, Savlon and a few of the other brands make these, and it's essentially a spray that puts a film over a cut. So let's just say you're out in filthy mud and you manage to slice your leg open pretty badly and you've not got much else with you. You haven't got provision to get clean with all the gloves and that sort of stuff. You can literally just use your water bottle to clean out the wound, and you can spray the stuff over it, and it basically is antiseptic, and it's just to get you to the nearest place scenario. So you're going to continue getting dirty as you ride. So it's a really good sort of thing for exactly that. Next up, I would say carrying some swabs for cuts is obviously a good idea. So if there's a lot of blood and stuff, you want to be able to soak that stuff up, and using something clean, not just the corner of your t-shirt or your riding jersey. Skin tags or skin closures are a really good idea, because the types of cut by nature you tend to get in the mountain bike are slices, whether that's on your elbows from sliding along the ground or from the pedal pins on your shin. It's that sort of cut that you're going to get. It's going to be deep and quite thin. So skin closure, once you've cleaned with an antiseptic wipe in and around that area, you can hold it back together again. So they're a really good thing to carry. General plasters are obviously quite handy for various reasons. It's good to carry a whole bunch of these. I've never had much success with the waterproof style of plaster. I tend to use sort of the fabric based ones, because the basically adhesion on them is far greater, and even if you're sweaty, they're still going to stick onto your skin and do the job you need them to do. So carrying some sort of eye cleaner is a good idea, especially if your glasses or contacts wear up, because at some point you're going to get grit and stuff in your eyes, and obviously being able to sort of flush it out is good. Obviously you can do this with water from your water bottle, but if that's covered in mud and muck, it's not the ideal scenario. A sling is good, and some sporting tape for compression sort of stuff is good as well. If you manage to roll your wrist or roll an ankle in a crash, you can add some stability to that limb or ankle joint, whatever, to enable yourself to get going. Ibuprofen is obviously good as a painkiller, or an alternative painkiller perhaps. Antihistamines are really good, especially in hotter places where you get lots of stinging insects and stuff, because you can suffer allergic reactions, and antihistamines are good for countering that. So there you go, there's just a few basics, but you have made me realise that we do need to readdress this, and I certainly do. I used to have a first aid course, so I need to do a refresher myself. So maybe we can turn this into a video of the sort of first aid that mountain bikers should have for out on the trail. So thanks for that idea, and hopefully those are good suggestions for you. Next up is from GTG470. Doddy, I've got a technical question on dropper posts. Most manufacturers recommended air pressure inside the post is 20 to 40, with a side note to not exceed 40. My question is, do you measure the air pressure with the seat all the way extended or all the way collapsed? I've always been doing this with my pump with the seat fully extended, and I wondered whether or not air pressure is increased when the seat is lowered all the way down. Any thoughts or recommendations on that? I would say extended, just because of the nature of how most dropper posts work. I've certainly done that in the past with RockShox reverb posts and other ones that I've needed to top up on the air pressure there. Now you just got to think about how a dropper post work. Okay, granted some of them are slightly different, but the basic concept with all of them is there's an inner and outer tube, and you've got the seat post itself, which is effectively your piston. The tube is full of oil and it's got air on the outer tube. So the inner tube, when you press a button, it opens a valve, enables you to push that piston down, displacing that oil into the outer tube, which compresses the air. And then you close the valve by releasing the button, whether it's under the saddle or on your bars, and basically your seat post becomes solid and it's low. And then when you want to return it, you press that lever in and it opens the valve again, and the compressed air forces the oil back the other way and the piston to come back up. Quite a simple system really. So obviously, yeah, by all accounts, then you can only really add the air in when the air is not compressed into that space. So when your seat post is fully extended. I'm sure there are some different posts out there, but that's the basic idea of them. That's the office chair sort of concept. Next up is from JB Lee. Hi guys, are there any alternative oils for Shimano mineral oil for my brakes, and can I use it in bleeding other brakes like the Tektros? Okay, so the fundamental thing with oils is there's either DOT type oil and mineral type oil. So as long as you're using one of those two, they are compatible. However, your manufacturer like Shimano will tell you that they only recommend their own, and the same with Magura with their blue mineral oil, they'll say exactly the same thing. So Shimano and Tektro both use the red style mineral oil. Magura uses the blue style oil. There are a number of aftermarket brands that offer mineral oils that are compatible. Now Finish Line make a lot of different lubricants. They make a generic mineral oil that's safe for use on Maguras, Shimanos, Tektros, all of those mineral oil brakes. So that is no problem, you can use that stuff. There's also Fenix, which make sort of bike wash and bike cleaning products. They make a mineral oil that's a generic one, so that one is safe for you to use. And also, who I mentioned in the show last week, Epic Bleed Solutions. They offer a number of oils, and they do the red oil for Shimano and Tektro, they do the blue oil for Magura brakes, and they do a bunch of other generic ones, but you'll be fine basically. It's just the manufacturers will only really recommend their own oils because they've developed it to work perfectly with their system. But as long as it's mineral oil and it is bicycle oil, you should be fine. So there you go, there's another Ask GMBN Tech clinic in the bag. Of course, please leave your comments in the comments section below. Fire your questions in, use that hashtag Ask GMBN Tech. And of course, you can fire them into the email address as we showed at the beginning of this week's show. Get the questions in and hopefully we'll answer them next week. If you want to see a couple more great videos, click right down here if you want to see Anton Cooper's Trek Pro Caliber World Cup cross country bike. It's got ISO Pulse technology on a really cool bike that. And click down here if you want to give your bike a bit of a spring clean. That's not literally cleaning in the sense of washing your bike. It's more about getting your bike prepped and nice primo condition for the trails this spring and summer. As always, click on that globe to subscribe and make sure you tell all your friends about us too. And if you liked or found this video helpful, give us a thumbs up.